trying to hear.
When I was a teenager, I was often home alone as my dad spent a lot of his time at our summer cottage with his girlfriend. I was responsible for the house, and if I needed to be informed of anything, my dad would call our home landline phone. Sometimes it would be about how to handle the fireplace on colder nights. Sometimes just to ask if the house was still in working order. One night, the phone rang, and instead of the normal going up the stairs to pick it up, I got a really bad feeling. Like if I picked up, it was going to be really bad. Like I should not answer the phone. I shook the feeling away because if my dad was calling this late, it had to be important. Only when I picked it up, it wasn't my dad. It was this not a human voice saying,
Hello.
I admit to smashing the phone back onto its holder and not wasting much time to get my shoes and jacket to run out. Yeah, I apparently scare easy. Fast forward 2 years. I'm in my first apartment and I have my own mobile phone. I was walking my brand new puppy when I got a call that went straight to voicemail. I got the same dread feeling, even though it was a sunny day and I was outdoors. I played my message, and I had one from my grandma and one from unknown number. I played both. The one from my grandma was just normal, like, call me back when you get this. And then, when it got to the other one, it was the same,
Hello.
in a not a human voice that I had heard a few years ago. I know it sounds ridiculous, but this is 100% true. The only way I can describe the voice is that it was between a growl and a speaking voice. This is something I don't tell people. Not because I'm a believer in paranormal, but because it sounds so weird. I also still don't like to be at my dad's house alone. It's a creepy circus of its own, but the phone calls still bother me, even though it's like 17 years ago.
I grew up in Cochise County, Arizona. Back in 87 or 88, my sister thought that it would be fun to buy a Ouija board and play around with it. I was in the 5th grade at the time and she was in 3rd. We both used it with our friends and amazed at the possibilities of reaching out to the dead. Of course, we asked questions about our futures and what heaven was like. I suspected my friend was the one controlling it as everything from my future sucked while his was on the path of Richie Rich. Everything changed when some of my mom's students came over to hang out. And this was the 80s, so things were different. 2 of my mom's students, we'll call them CJ and JT, adored her. When my sister told them about the board, their teenage minds kicked in. They told us about a spirit named Chris. He was a murder victim that lived in Bisbee from the late 1800s to the early 1900s. I remember him having a sense of humor, and we spoke with him frequently. His accounts of the future was different from my friends. Some of it was over 30 years ago. I can't recall those details as they weren't important. It's what happened after a few sessions. It was a weekend night. My dad was working the late shift, so it was the 3 of us and her 2 students. They were having a session when they contacted something more malevolent. The entity claimed to be Satan himself. Worse yet, it refused to leave. They'd say goodbye and it would just move to no. It was taunting them. Naturally, the students and my mom started freaking out. I remember my mom commanding it to leave and quoting scripture, but it refused. Then it started to spell out a last name. The energy in the room changed. It wasn't cold. It was weird. After a bit, we walked away from it, but I distinctly remember my mom leaving the planchette on the letter R because I contacted it the first letter of my friend's last name. She didn't care. Everyone was spooked. We left the board by itself and went into the family room to decompress and watch a movie. About 30 minutes later or so, the doorbell rings. Another of our students. I invited them in and remembered the board. I checked and I was shocked to see that it had moved to P, the first letter of our last name. I told my mom this and she brushed it off as me doing it to mess around. I think it scared the hell out of her. After that, we tried it again and got a hold of Chris. Immediately the energy changed and felt relaxed and warm. He said that Satan didn't move it, and that he was a pussy. We ended up picking up the board and putting it in the closet in my sister's room. She claimed that she'd heard voices coming from it at night. We ended up getting rid of it after a close family friend who worked in cleansing houses saw it and freaked out. We never had anything else happen after that. Never had anything really before. My parents sold the house in '88 and we moved to a different town. Now, I've always been the one to seek rational explanations for things. This game was invented around the turn of the century, i.e., probably fake. The only thing that I can come up with was that after we left, one of them must have moved it, or whatever they contacted moved it when we left. When speaking with CJ earlier this month about it, she says she didn't remember anyone leaving the room until the doorbell rang, but she did say that it spooked her. To this day, neither my sister nor I have owned one of those games. So there you go. I do have other instances later that both my sister and I experienced, but that'll be a post for another time.
I'm not too sure where to start. After a hasty move, I ended up living in the projects for a little bit after moving as quick as I could. Nothing was worse than the situation I was in. While I was living there, I met a girl. We hit it off and started dating. Before I knew it, we were in a serious relationship. Neither of us were a fan of where I lived, and one day she mentioned that her dad owned an apartment and a back house on the property was available. I made up a story for my landlord and was able to break the lease without penalty. The back house turned out to be a really nice 2-bedroom unit. It had everything, including washer-dryer hookups and my own parking spot that had a gate that I could manually open and close and locked with a key. This place quickly felt like home. One day I went to a friend's house. He had another friend there, and they were at his computer watching some Faces of Death stuff. I didn't want to get involved, but my curiosity got the best of me, and I saw a few videos that I really hoped were fake. I wasn't there too long. It was a little too much, so I left. That night, I began having one of the strangest, kind of terrifying, recurring dreams. This went on for weeks. I will do my best to describe everything. It starts in a very dimly lit room from a distance. At least, I think it is. I'm seeing everything in that dream third-person perspective. I'm starting to see shapes in the darkness. I'm starting to hear just like the mantra. It's extremely deep, has extreme bass, and I can feel it through my entire body as the volume increases. Visibility increases as the sound gets louder, and I start to make something out. I'm extremely overwhelmed by the sound and the feelings, but I'm trying to focus. There is a woman that looks naked and flailing around. Everything is dark, but I can make out 2 figures. As I get closer and the sound gets even louder, it starts getting brighter, but only slightly. 2 figures become 4, and I'm able to see more, and I realize the woman is flailing because these beings each have a hold of one of her limbs. It looks like she's trying to free herself. She begins screaming violently, and the gets louder and heavier. It begins rattling my soul. I don't know how to describe it, a feeling I experienced in this dream, and this dream alone. She begins screaming even louder. It's clear that this is a very strange ritualistic room, illuminated by several candles. As she screams, I start to drift closer. She's naked. She has what looks like mud all over her body. Something is wrong. She not only is trying to break free, but she's clearly in great pain. As I realize this, her stomach begins to grow, like a sped-up pregnancy. She's kicking and trying to rip her arms away, screaming louder and louder as she grows. When it looks like she's straight up full term and ready to pop, I drift closer. The noise gets louder. I start noticing adult-sized fingers dragging and poking out from the inside. I realize the men are no longer holding her limbs, but instead have her bound by chains, each one holding a chain. She stops fighting and screams even louder. The scream is getting piercing. The sound of the Om is getting deeper and overwhelmingly loud. And then it happens. Two extremely dark grey hands tear through the woman's stomach, then quickly pulls its hands back in. I'm getting closer. A grey bald head starts rising out of the hole it just put in the woman's stomach from the inside. This thing is rising out of her, its head cocked down. The Om is getting louder and darker, and I can't help to get the feeling that I'm in a lot of trouble. The figure rises. The woman stopped moving a long time ago, and this thing continues to slowly rise to the sound of the Om. It's a grey figure, some kind of demon. I'm getting closer. I'm getting more terrified. When it's fully free, it's levitating over the body. I get pulled directly face to face to this thing. Its eyes are closed, head cocked down. In an instant, it snaps its head up and opens its eye. It's horrific, glowing yellow. It scares me so bad I wake up. This nightmare would keep me up for the next few weeks. My girlfriend started complaining of the feeling of a cold hand on her feet at night, and soon this was another place she feared spending the night. She felt like something would pick on her at night, like she wasn't welcome. The day I proposed to her proved that she wasn't lying. I made plans to propose to my now wife. I asked permission. I did everything old school. The day I planned to propose, everything was going wrong. My girlfriend's car was suddenly having issues. It died on her 3 times in the same day. This put her in a bad mood. We get to our restaurant for dinner, and it turned out my reservation was booked for the exact time the damn place closes. I still hope someone got fired for that bullshit. Anyways, we leave, and I quickly find a decent place nearby on Yelp. We get there. The food was good, but the place was cramped. There wasn't much space between chairs, so it was impossible for me to get down on one knee. Dinner's over. We get back to my place, and I can't wait another night. I'm proposing now. While we're not in the kitchen, I start telling her that I can no longer wait, gave her a little speech, and got on one knee. She says yes. We're hugging for a while. Then everything in my cupboard proceeds to fly out as if the supports from all the shelves broke at the same time. It looked like an avalanche. It was loud, thunderous, and a bitch to clean up. The night I proposed was also the same night I told her I think I'm being followed. She would stay the night and complain about cold hands on her feet all the time. She assumed that it was me while I was getting ready for work. I would just say, "You're tripping," and then left it at that. The next few weeks, she would say this. I would only have that dream when she was gone. My fiance's jewelry started disappearing. She started getting scratches. Things got bizarre. Not long after, things escalated to WTF status. I'm at my house, alone. I'm having the same dream, but everything is somehow more vivid, more real, more intense. This woman is screaming and screaming, and I'm closer than I've ever been before. And I see the hands in the stomach, and I see the grey head force and rip its way out of her stomach. I'm much closer now. I'm being forced to watch everything. I see her stomach open, and there's blood everywhere, where inside are wiggling live worms. Then this grey thing rockets out of her stomach and opens its eyes, locking eyes with me. It scares me so bad I woke up, but I wasn't ready for what happened next. I wake up from this dream like a straight-up jump scare. I wake up to blood-curdling screaming. I mentioned before that I have my own parking spot. Like I said before, this was a back house, and their parking spot was right next to the back house. The property was fenced in. There was a metal gate that manually opened and closed. I was the only one with a key besides the landlord. The entrance to the spot was from an alley. At night, it was dark and spooky, and sometimes I would be lazy about locking the gate. I snap out of this dream, woken up by fear. Before I catch my breath, my heart skips a beat when I start hearing screaming. I mean screaming. It's really loud and I can hear the labor between each breath. I freeze for a few seconds. The noise is coming from right outside my window on the alley side. But it doesn't sound like it's in the alley. It sounds like it's right outside my window. And it dawns on me that I didn't lock the door. I just gave some lunatic the perfect place to bring someone. I have the Wish app. I buy stupid shit like a machete that looks like a samurai sword. So what? I don't own a gun. This is all I have to protect myself, and hopefully it's enough for what I'm about to do. The screaming is so loud, it's terrifying. Someone needs help. I'm on my way. I turn on the light of my room. My dog is looking through the window. She's going ballistic, but she's a chihuahua, so she has to just sit this one out. I open my back door. The screaming continues. I turn the porch light on, and right when I'm about to jump off my porch, I look, and there is nothing there. In fact, from where I'm standing, the screaming is coming from my room. I'm like, what? And run inside. All of the screaming is really overwhelming and disorienting. I ran back to my room. The screams are still loud and piercing, and I don't know what to do. There is no one outside and no one inside. What is this? Where is the noise coming from? My dog is on my bed growling, but now she looks scared. She's not in attack mode. She's in I'm right where you've got me mode. Completely scared. In the next few seconds, I decide to try to follow the screams. As I get closer, I realize that this is not coming from outside. It's not coming from the window. The sound is close to the wall, but it's also coming from underneath my bed. I'm not that scared. I'm more like, what? How? The floors in my room were tile. My bed was on a metal frame with wheels. I grabbed the bed and easily pulled it away from the wall. The screaming intensified, but after another few seconds, it just stopped. All of this happened in maybe 30 seconds. After that, everything just stopped. As mysteriously as the thing arrived, it vanished.
My experiences with the supernatural are many, and I could tell you all stories for hours. I'll share 3 in this post. I've been able to see and hear them my entire life, and so has my brother, who I'll call Johnny. The house we grew up in was a hotbed for demonic activity. My earliest memory of seeing a demon was when I was 4 years old. I had been sitting at the kitchen table in my childhood home, eating a bowl of cereal for breakfast. This was while my mother was doing her hair in the bathroom, when I heard footsteps coming towards me from the kitchen. When I turned to look, a hooded shadow figure was standing in front of the refrigerator, and I could feel it looking at me. It called itself the Shiver Man, and when it started to move closer to me, I ran past it into the bathroom with my mom, slammed the door, and locked it. I was utterly terrified when I crawled up on the toilet as my mom asked what was wrong. "Don't open the door, Mom! The Shiver Man is out there and he's going to get me!" She chalked it up to an overactive imagination, and when she unlocked and opened the door, the Shiver Man stepped into the room. His long, bony fingers stretched out towards me, and I backed as far away from him as I could on the toilet, which wasn't far at all. I shivered when he touched me, and he disappeared into the thin air. Some entities stayed in mine and my parents' closets. and I would see them come out at night. I don't know whether it was the same and it just moved closets when I was in the room or if they were separate. When I got older, I asked my friends when they come over if they ever felt strange when they went into my closet, and every one of them said they felt like something was in there with them that wanted them out. For whatever reason, I slept with my walk-in closet door wide open until I was 9. The doors to my and my parents' closets never stayed closed because the part that held them closed in the door frame had been painted over. One night, I had looked at my closet and suddenly a huge demon stepped out. I couldn't see its facial features, thank God, but its silhouette was very clear. It had horns on the top of its huge, round head, a fork in one hand, a knife in the other, and a napkin tied around its neck. As it started walking towards my bed, I gauged the distance between it and me and the door, trying to figure out if I could make it past it so I could get to my parents' room. I finally decided to take the chance, and I bolted from my bed and down the hall to my mom. She let me crawl into bed with her, but I wasn't going to get any reprieve. When I looked into the corner of her room where her closet was, another demon slipped through the crack and into the door. This one was much slimmer. It was probably the Shiver Man because it was slim and hooded, just like he was 5 years prior. When it pointed at me, a swarm of smaller entities emerged from the blackness and lined up around the bed, effectively blocking me in. I wasn't going anywhere. I didn't want to wake my mom up again. I was scared that she would get upset if I woke her up again. I had no idea what to do with these things at that age, so I buried my head under the covers and pressed up against my mom and eventually passed out from exhaustion. The next morning, we went over to my grandmother's for breakfast because one of my auntie and uncles were visiting with their kids, and we didn't get to see them very often. I sat at the table, pushing my fruit around on my plate, trying to make sense of the night before. When my family asked what was wrong, I told them. They all laughed and told me that I was crazy, and I knew I was on my own. I thought I was the only one who could see these things, that no one would ever help me, and no one would understand. 3 years later, I learned otherwise. I had been at a friend's house to play after church when I was 12. For privacy, I'll call her Allie. I remember sitting in her room, talking about demons and what to do if I ever had an encounter with one. I have no idea how we ended up on this subject, but it saved my little brother, who was 10, that night. Allie told me that if I ever saw a demon, all I had to say was, "Get out, in the name of God," and it would have to leave. Later, when I had washed up for bed at night, I just started up the stairs to go to my room when Johnny opened his door and asked if he could talk to me. His was the only bedroom on the main floor. The living room was to the right if you stood facing out the door, and the bathroom was right around the corner to the left. He usually always slept with his bedroom door open. There was an extra mattress on the floor from the sleepover he had with his friends the weekend before, and he had been sleeping on it instead of his bed. I promise those details will be important. He closed the door behind us and we sat down on the bed. "I need to tell you something, but you can't tell Mom and Dad because they'll think I'm crazy," he begged, and I promised I wouldn't. "I know you can see things, so I know you won't think so. The last few days, I've been seeing something follow me," he said. "Whenever I get up at night to go to the bathroom or get a drink of water, I see a big black dog with glowing red eyes come out of the living room and follow me back to my room." I know my eyes bugged out as I recalled what Allie and I had talked about earlier that day, and I swallowed thickly. "Okay," I started, carefully considering my next words. No matter how I put it, I knew what I was going to tell him would terrify him. "Johnny, I don't want to scare you, but I think what you're seeing is a demon." He started to cry, of course. We were only 10 and 12. How the hell are two kids who can see demons supposed to feel when everyone in the family thinks they're insane? Johnny had seen what happened to me when I tried to tell our family what I could see, so he kept his gift to himself. I took his hand in mine. "Look at me. okay? Allie told me today what to do if we ever see a demon. If it comes back tonight, I want you to say, in the name of God, get out. God will protect you, Johnny. He's not going to let anything bad happen to you. He nodded and said, okay, and I went upstairs to bed. I should have stayed with him. I don't know why I didn't, but he told me what had happened the next morning. It came back, he said, but I could see that he felt empowered. I slept on the mattress on the floor instead of my bed. And when I woke up because I had to go to the bathroom, the dog was standing in my room already, snarling and staring at me. I did what you said and I told it to get out in the name of God. And it turned around with its tail between its legs and walked away and disappeared. He threw his arms around me. Thank you for telling me what to do. Johnny never saw it again. I don't know if it was a hellhound or just a demon manifesting as a giant black dog with glowing red eyes. A few years ago, when I was telling that same story to a friend, he told me that his mom had seen the same dog when she was in high school. She was babysitting for someone and was watching TV after putting the kids to bed. She turned out all the lights, so the only light in the room was the semicircle from the TV. Suddenly, she felt very uneasy. When she turned to look behind her, she saw the big black dog with red eyes pacing behind the couch, growling and trying to figure out how to get closer to her without touching the light. These are only 3 stories of the activity in that house. When I have time, I'll share more of my experiences. I found myself wondering if the people living there now have ever had any encounters with the demons. More specifically, I've wondered if their children have, and if they've seen anything. I worry that they'll end up feeling like Johnny and I did. Like no one in the world will believe them.
I've been an avid camper most of my life. More than that, I actually lived in the Wyoming wilderness for almost 2 years as a child in a house on a nature preserve. A place where electricity was only available by generator, and we had to boil water that me and my siblings carried up from the creek. All of this before I was even 10 years old. If there were emergencies, it would at least be an hour before we could get to help or help could get to us. I've hunted dangerous game. I'm not actually proud of it, but it happened. And I've seen some weird stuff in the desert. So when I say that I will not venture into the woods of the Cascadian mountain range alone, it's important to know that the wilderness doesn't frighten me easily. I was 23 years old when a friend of mine, we'll call him Darren, all names are altered, invited me to a camping trip. The site was a place a few miles up a logging road, so about an hour-long hike from an already back road as F back road. It was just me, Darren, and his good friend Wade. The place was, from the logging road, about 10 minutes down a trail. The moment we got to the site, I was excited. The small lake was beautiful, barely touched by people over the years. It also comforted me somewhat when we got there to see that within the last month at least somebody else had camped out there. Extra wood by the fire pit. We ate a bunch of chili and hot dogs, but around dusk, the guys went off into the woods and came back with a sealed bucket they had buried the years before, and we opened it up to get into some MREs they stowed in their cache. It was looking to be one of the better camping trips I've had in my adult life. That night was a bit different. For the first time in my life, I felt an uneasiness sleeping in my tent. I couldn't quite place it. Chalked it up to not being used to camping without my dad. Darren brought his .38 special for protection from predators, but he was the only one armed. The next day it rained, and we tried to wait it out, but eventually called it quits, packed up and went home. Fast forward to the next year. Me and Darren get the itch to go camping again, and I wanted to give the site another shot. I spent a great deal of effort convincing a bunch of my friends to tag along. In the end, It wound up being 6 of us and a big white German shepherd. Me, Darren, Wade, James, Charles and Rita, James's girlfriend, and Moogie, the dog. Knowing about the uneasiness I felt the last time, I brought my 12 gauge. James wanted to get some unregulated target practice in, shooting stuff they don't allow at official gun ranges, like full cans and gallon jugs. We also brought a quad up with us this time, so we could haul a bunch of extra water, booze and other supplies to make our weekend more comfortable. First day as we're setting up, we hear a loudspeaker playing some music over by the south end of the lake, which was basically right next to the logging road, and this year could be seen from the road unlike the year prior. So, deciding we're big dick Americans, me and James sauntered down to meet the source of the noise pollution. Now, I have to commend the coolness of the cop that was just having a fishing trip when 2 large armed men, me with a 12 gauge, James with his 308, emerged from the tree line. We introduced ourselves, mentioned the others, but not exactly where we were camping, just that it was nearby. That's when shit started to get creepy. It could have just been cops doing cop stuff, but this guy really wanted to know exactly where we were going to be. Then he mentioned his favorite spots nearby, and really wanted us to try this other spot 2 more miles down the logging road. At a point, it was almost like he was suggesting that was the only spot where we wouldn't be in trouble. Darren showed up finally, told us that he spoke to the landowners several years ago, and they were fine with us being there. Cop was mad, but we lied and said we'd check out the site he was pushing. None of us trusted the guy when we left, so we decided not to. It was like a horror movie setup. The whole shady cop tells us to go to the spot where his hillbilly friends are going to kidnap us kind of vibe. So we move on. Pretty early in the day, so we set up our stuff, get a fire going, float around on a giant 4-person inflatable chair boat thing. Biggest highlight of the day? Charles cut down an entire dead tree with nothing but a small axe, like the midway point between a hatchet and a fireman's axe. An impressive feat of stamina and strength. It was a good day leading to a good night, but right after it got dark, I felt uneasy again. The first thing that worried me was a couple of us heard something big splash into the far side of the lake. We thought maybe it was Moogie, but he was by the fire, his head now perked up and looking in the direction of the splash. Since we were drunk, we thought maybe the floaty thing might be compromised, so we went down with our flashlights to pull it out of the water and onto the bank. Then we heard the owl. James, Wade, and Darren were already passed out by midnight. Rita was humming along by the fireplace with Moogie, and me and James were out getting some more wood so the fire would last. We heard an owl start up its hooting, a cadence I was familiar with in the area, but something was off about it. I have a gift for mimicking bird noises, so what I noticed immediately is the ending hoot was off. Almost always sounds like the owl is rolling its R's as that final hoot of the sequence goes. James, not nearly as outdoorsy as me, says, "That almost just sounds like a person." We joke, listen to it a couple more times. Then I do my own attempt at an owl noise. Silence. For a few minutes. Just as I'm thinking that makes sense because of the noise, it starts up again. But not just one owl. Another started up about half a second after the first. The new owl sounded more like an actual owl than the first one that seemed to have started up again. And after the first hoot from the real owl, the fake one stopped short. "Did that owl just tell the other owl to shut up?" James says to me. I decide to shout, "Better listen to your wife, dude." Immediately after I shout, we both hear a loud crashing, almost identical to the sound of the tree falling that Charles did earlier that day. Moogie starts to go berserk, barking and growling. He had a stink gland issue at this point still, so he was releasing that nastiness as well. He was threatened, and luckily Rita was there to keep him from bolting. Big as he was, if he really wanted to move, she wouldn't be much of an obstacle. I'm about to shit my pants out of fear. I will reiterate for a fact, I've hunted mountain lions and bears in my life, and at no point during those hunts was I as shaken and genuinely afraid as this. I was paralyzed for like an entire minute. "Whoever that is, you better fuck off. We have plenty of guns," I shout across the lake. Then silence again. Luckily, for the rest of the night, I didn't fall asleep until Darren woke up, basically at sunrise. So I missed breakfast and a morning dunk in the lake the others all did before I got up needing to poo real bad. James had already explained the noises to the others by the time we all were ready for our different adventures. Darren, Wade and Rita just wanted to listen to the radio and chill. Moogie had run off just after lunch, and we decided to go look for him, while also investigating the area of the noises last night. Almost immediately, when we get to the other side of the lake, the hair stands up on the back of my neck. Charles also feels creeped out, but he had an axe. I had a shotgun, and James had his rifle and his .45 holstered on his hip. So we pressed onward, looking for probably a couple of hours. I was mainly trying to see if we could spot any trees that had fallen. Then we made it to the eastern bank of the lake. We were camped on the western side. "Holy shit," Charles says, causing me and James to come rushing over. There, we saw what looked like a human footprint. Just one, but it was very clearly a footprint in the mud, even had a little pool of water still in it. My first thought was Bigfoot, so I took off my boot and compared sizes. I'm a huge guy with pretty large feet, so it wasn't a surprise that my clodhoppers dwarfed this footprint when I put my own print down next to it. But what was weird was the other print. Where the pinky toe would be, it looked like another big toe was there instead. We also found several downed trees, but none that looked recent. So we decided to go around the north of the lake and back to the others, doing a full circle. Mookie was fine. As soon as food smells filled the air, he came running back. And we all had a pretty good day again. Drinking, feasting, and making fun of each other for being paranoid. We heard some gunshots a little close, and then we called out to warn the shooters that there were people and animals nearby. The shooters of us actually went to meet the people, and all of us but Darren and Wade joined the old guy and his wife shooting at whatever we could. Part of me consciously thought, anything that was lurking around sure as hell isn't now. Boy, was I wrong. A brief mention about Charles. Ever since we were kids, Charles has had vivid night terrors. Most of the time, funny. Some of the time, scary. He'd full on sleepwalk and have conversations with you while still asleep. We had all gone to bed. I was one of the first, due to getting like 4 hours of sleep and being quite rum drunk. "Hey, who's that?" "Captain, stay in your tent." Charles, who was sleeping on a tarp by the fire instead of a tent, started shouting. I shot up, grabbed the shotgun, and turned on my flashlight. "What's wrong?" I shouted, adrenaline filling my entire existence. I could feel my heartbeat pounding in my ears. "Come closer to the fire. No, don't crouch down. Use your words." He keeps shouting, finally stirring awake James and Rita, who were in the tent closest to Charles. "What the hell?" James calls out. Moogie starts growling, and apparently let off the stink gland again in their tent because him and Rita are like, "Oh, Moog, gross." "There's somebody sneaking up in Captain's tent. Get out here." I start to unzip my tent. "Not you, Captain. Stay in there. He's right next to you." Everybody else, to this day, denies hearing this, but I swear I heard something whisper, "Captain," before hearing a twig crunch right outside my tent. James makes it out of his tent, and seconds later, I hear him laughing. "It's just the water stump. Charles is just having a night terror. Charles claims he wasn't dreaming, but when I got out and shined the light on the stump, he agreed that that had to be it. We put one of those big jugs of water on top of a stump. It could easily be mistaken for a white shirt standing in the dark. Satisfied that there wasn't actually anything there, despite my protests, we all went back to bed. Charles stayed in the tent for the rest of the night. I decided to spend the rest of the night on watch. That was one of, if not the most, terrifying nights of my life. I heard more activity in those woods than I had ever heard before. Moogie would wake up and barf multiple times as I'd hear twigs snapping off in the trees. Then I heard a really big snap that had to have only been about 10 feet away. I jumped to my feet, whipped over to where the noise was, and shined my light. I've seen enough deer ass in my life to know what I saw running from me. What is not normal of deer, however, is they don't stand up and run on their back legs. Moogie howled and snarled. I took aim, letting my light drop, and fired. I didn't care that it turned to run. I unloaded, boom after boom after boom, until I ran out of all 6 shells I had loaded. Everyone else was freaking out and rushed out of their tents. I told them what happened, and nobody went back to bed until the morning. Nothing else happened that night. I think Moogie refusing to leave the tent was what allowed the others to take me seriously enough. He was a brave dog, sweet, but if mean dogs messed with him at the park, he knew how to throw down. The last thing that happened on that last day, Darren and Wade went to bury the bucket after putting some fresh new supplies in it. They'd always known where the cache was buried because there was a stump that they used as a landmark. That stump was just gone. It was there when we retrieved the cache 2 days prior, but now it was vanished. No signs of it being uprooted, dragged, or disturbed. It simply was as though it never existed. We all thought we made a mistake until we found the hole for the bucket, still dug and with the little poncho stuffed in it. Well, I'm never coming back here now, so we may as well take this with us, Darren said, and we all left after lunch. That is why I will never even go hiking the Cascade Wilderness without a firearm and at least 2 other people who know how to use them. Hello all, my name is Vince and I am a 58-year-old pastor in a mainline denomination, Lutheran LCMS to be precise. We are a conservative lot and, to be quite frank, overeducated in a lot of ways. Firstly, 4 years of undergrad in psych, 4 years of theology, working on a doctorate in pastoral theology in my case. So not a lot of practical knowledge, but a lot of theology, church history, apologetics, hermeneutics, exegesis, and ancient languages. Now, my denomination, while paying lip service to demonic activity, still gives us no practical training on how to handle the demonic in their actuality, other than not give them any more attention than they deserve, because attention only fuels the demonic entity's foolish pride. Having to learn on the fly about how to handle the supernatural has led me to some strange experiences. The first involved my sister and her 2 daughters. One day, about 20 years ago, when I was still a vicar, an apprentice pastor, my sister called me. She was panicking. It seems that she and her daughters had been having, for some time, very frightening experiences. I don't call them paranormal. They are in fact normal experiences in spiritual warfare situations. They were enduring bad smells, doors banging, the sound of large feet running upstairs when no one was upstairs, religious articles such as crucifixes and religious art being bent out of shape and torn up, Now, and this instigated the phone call, they were seeing a very large full-body apparition at the top of their stairs. They were, to put it mildly, terribly afraid. The first thing I did was tell my sister during the call that it sounded like she was being oppressed, not possessed. They were all baptized. The devil cannot possess a soul that is indwelt by the Holy Spirit. He is too strong. In fact, the demonic are terrified of the Holy Trinity. However, they can oppress even the saved. The devil is allowed to do that. After giving what comfort I could, I told her I would be right over. When I came to her home and entered the house, I heard footsteps running upstairs. So even though I was afraid, obviously I went upstairs. The feet ran away from me. I heard them running to a closet. Fearfully but resolutely, I opened the door. Nothing. Nothing at all but the smell of something rotting. So I took out my stole, kissed it. Then, after kissing my crucifix, I pulled out the pastoral companion and started the rite for the blessing of a house. It is then that all hell broke loose. Hell is capitalized. It is a place like Scranton. So anyway, all hell broke loose downstairs. There is baying, screaming, running, out and out mayhem going on downstairs. I then tear down the stairs, and there are my sisters and nieces, holding each other, reciting the breastplate of St. Patrick prayer that I had given them earlier. While a dark, very large and very male entity loomed over them. It is then that I yelled out, "Begone, demon! Make way for the Holy Spirit." At that, it fled through the door. The place was calm and peaceful now. The entity had fled. Why? Why were these Christians persecuted by the demonic? Well, on checking up on the background, I found out that one of my niece's boyfriends was a bit schizotypal, and unbeknownst to all, until later was, while dating her, doing quite a bit of crystal meth. Trust me on this one, that is not a good combination. He thought he was hearing voices, so to combat them, he prayed to Satan to stop the voices. He asked for a demon to protect him. Evidently, Satan complied. However, when he stopped coming over, the demon stayed. That is where I came in. After I got home, I called some Korean pastors I know. These guys are the ultimate prayer warriors. They pray every day of the year for 3 hours a day on their faces before the altar. They agreed to pray for me, my sister, and my nieces. And that is it. They never had another paranormal experience. However, this was the first of many more supernatural experiences to come for me. In the just recounted situation, I would like to say I was exceptionally brave. But I don't like to break the 8th commandment. I am not. I was afraid. I am sure, though, of my faith and my God. I was certain that I was safe, even when I entered the home and felt a cold, wet tongue lick me all the way from my ankles to my upper inner thigh while I was wearing trousers. Let me tell you, that was a cure for constipation. Some years back, I was serving a congregation in upstate New York. Now this town was in the armpit of God's creation. No names. I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings if it happens to be anyone who hears this story's hometown. I mean, even God's armpit has good people living in it. Still, this place was a dump. A lot of crime and drug abuse. Still, there were a lot of lovely people there, especially in our church. Our congregation was made up mostly of seniors, as is usually the case. Young people today will believe in witches, wendigos, vampires, and the Fae. Anything but God, let alone Jesus. Still, among my congregants, there were some youngish people that attended. In particular, and the focus of this story, was an insurance claims adjuster named Barbara. Now, Barbara was pure Brooklyn Italian. Loud, brash and just an all-round delightful person. She, like many from the area, was afraid of no one or no thing. At least, nothing physical. One day, Barbara called me on the phone. She said excitedly that she needed to see me as soon as possible. Hearing the panic in her voice, I said, "Sure, all right, come on over." And so she did. I was puzzled by that call, but hey, being there for people is all in a day's work for a pastor. People do not come to visit us when everything is doing great in their lives. When she showed up, I was shocked. The lady, who was always perfectly coiffed, with big puffy hair, perfect makeup and nails, was a mess. Her hair was dank and had fallen all around her face. Her eyes were red and puffy. She had dark circles under them. Frankly, it looked like she had been crying and hadn't slept for a while. I immediately thought the worst had happened to her after seeing her arrive in such a state. My first notion was that someone had assaulted her, a common occurrence in this town, or that one of her kids had been hurt or killed. It turned out I was wrong on both counts. When I got a coherent story out of her, it boiled down to this. She had been sent out by her insurance company to survey an old house. The house had been built around the turn of the last century, and so it was a late Victorian Edwardian era house. Think of the haunted mansion at Disneyland. Anyhow, she with her dog, a little Yorkie, was sent out to the house to do the claim. Now, you need to understand that the weather was exceptionally cold that day, and had been for a couple of weeks. So when she got there, she was not surprised to see that the whole house was covered in ice. Odd, but not unexpected, since there had been an ice storm in our area a few days earlier. So she was not particularly surprised, this being the case. She then made her way inside the house via the pass key. It was then that she noticed the interior of the house was completely covered in ice. Again, not surprising. It was cold, and since it was an old house and had stood empty for a while, the pipes had frozen, or so Barbara thought. Barbara then starts doing her adjuster thing. Now, this was a while ago, so she starts taking Polaroid pictures. For you kids, as hard as it is to believe, there was a time when we did not have cameras on our cell phones. In fact, we did not even have cell phones. Anyhow, she was taking pictures all over the house on her Polaroid camera when, with her dog whimpering and cowering behind her, she got to the basement door. Now, while nothing untoward had happened so far, Barbara was still feeling very creeped out. She felt a strong urge to run. Unfortunately, she ignored that feeling. As an aside, never ignore your feelings. That is the Holy Spirit prompting you. Anyhow, she forced herself forward because it was her job to find all the damages to the place, so that she could write up the claim, and she really needed her job. With hesitating steps, she and her dog slowly went down the stairs into the basement. As she's going down, in the dark, with only her flashlight, she saw something dart out in front of her. Then, a horrendous stench filled her nostrils. She said it smelt like something really awful had died down there. As she was overpowered by the stench, she heard an ear-bursting scream. So, being smart and not an idiot in a horror movie, she, as you kids say, noped it back up the stairs. She ran to the front door, her dog yelping and running after her. When she got to the door, she found that it would not open. So she pulled and pulled. Nothing. She checks the lock, but it's unlocked, yet still won't open. Finally, her adrenaline kicked in so hard that she pulled the knob out from the door, and it fell onto the floor. She then flung it open, grabbed her Yorkie, and jumped into her car and raced home. By the time Barbara arrived home, her rational mind had kicked in. She started to think that her mind had played tricks on her. She had convinced herself that it was all a figment of her imagination. when she pulled out the pictures that she had taken in the house to start writing up her report. It was then that she saw it. A young woman holding a child's hand. Both of them were wearing period dress from around the early 20th century. Both of them had their mouths open, as if screaming. It was then, she said, that she fainted for the first time in her life. Now Barbara, being the tough woman that she is, tried to tough it out. But then, the dream started. Horrible nightmares about the woman and child dying after having been given poison by her husband and her child's father. Barbara endured this torment for about 2 weeks, but after that she could take it no longer, so she came to see me for help. After hearing this story, I then asked to see the pictures she had taken. She was not lying or delusional. There was a woman and a child in period dress in them. Upon seeing this proof, I performed a minor exorcism on her. However, I feared that an exorcism on her alone would not be enough to give her peace. So, I asked her for the address of the house. I told Barbara that I needed to go to that place and cleanse it, lest Barbara never be given any peace. So, packing up Penny, my pit bull, who will chew anyone's face off that tries to hurt me, as well as putting my old .38 Smith & Wesson in my pocket. Like I said, the town was sketchy. I went to the house. It was how Barbara had described it. There was a doorknob on the floor, and the door was still wide open. Oddly, no vagrants had taken refuge there. Now, strangely, the ice had disappeared from outside of the building as the weather had warmed up since she had been there. But on the inside of the house, it was still icy. It was like going into an old ice house, which was a thing even before my time. Odd, I thought as I surveyed the place. So I kissed my white stole and crucifix. It was just after Easter. I know in every movie the priest wears a purple stole, but the stoles are colored for a reason, and that reason is the season. Purple is for Lent and Advent. White, Easter and Christmas. Green for common time. I am digressing. Sorry, I am old. Anyhow, I put them on and proceeded to start the blessing. Now, nothing happened to me. No ghost, no vampires, no smells, nothing. Still, I felt distinctly uneasy as I walked to the house. Because the whole time I was there, I thought I was being watched. In this feeling, I was not alone. Penny felt something too. But being made of sterner stuff than Barbara's Yorkie, she did not cower or cringe behind me. She was in full fur missile mode, shoulders hunched up ready to attack anything that moved. Everything was all right until we hit the basement. Fearing vagrants, I pulled out my pistol as I went down the stairs while saying the prayers. It was then that I heard a scream. Did you ever get a sudden drop in your stomach and adrenaline surge while scared? The Bible calls that a girding of the loins. I felt that. Anyhow, it is at that moment that Penny went hurtling in front of me, snarling and snapping. There was horrendous screaming. However, I could not see a thing. After a few seconds, that seemed like a few epochs, Penny came trotting back to me, wagging her tail and looking at me for her good girl. She had a possum in her mouth. A very much newly dead bloody possum. Laughing to myself, I finished my prayers and left, certain that while there may have been a spirit there, it had been cleansed and the screamer would scream no more, thanks to Penny. As I was leaving, thinking that there was a job well done, I looked back at the front door. It was open again. There stood the woman and her child. I did not go back. The aftermath? Barbara no longer had dreams after we burned the picture, and her faith has been strengthened. The insurance company had it demolished, and now they are putting affordable housing on the land. Oh, and Penny got a big pig's knuckle to gnaw on. I think she would have preferred the possum. Greetings all. Pastor Vincia. Being a pastor is mostly routine. Visiting the sick, performing weddings and funerals, preparing and presenting sermons and Bible studies. It is usually a calm, peaceful life. Yet, there are some dangers. As you may or may not know, when you work in certain professions, there are certain locations that you should not travel to. For example, if you are in law enforcement, you're warned by your superiors not to travel to Mexico, because the narco-terrorists and other gangs might do you harm. Or if you are in the US military, it is probably not a good idea to travel to Iraq or Afghanistan for a holiday. It will most likely not end well for you. This is just common sense. You might be surprised that there are no-go places for clergy as well. These places are so dangerous that when you are training to become a member of the clergy, you are warned that it is not a good idea to travel to Haiti or New Orleans. This is because there is a lot of spiritual warfare occurring in those places, due to the rampant practice of voodoo and the other dark arts. Now normally, I am a cautious fellow. If things seem to be sketchy at a location, I tend to stay away from it. I mean, why go looking for trouble? Trouble will always find you. So you might ask yourself, why did I end up in New Orleans one fine day in October? Well, it comes from one of my weaknesses. You see, I don't drink or do drugs or smoke. Not from any moral qualms, but because of my duties, I need to keep a clear head. If someone gets sick or is in trouble and needs my help, I can't respond properly if I am impaired. That being said, I do have a weakness. We all do. That is how the devil gets to you. My weakness is food. Not gluttony in the sense that I overeat and am fat. No, I just like the taste of different and good food. That is how I ended up in New Orleans. I was on a trip to Gulfport, Mississippi for a conference. And instead of flying directly there, I just had to stop off in New Orleans to try all the really good food available there. Specifically, the food at the world-famous Commander's Palace. So my wife and I, yes, I am married. I am a pastor, not a priest. Priests make sacrifices. I don't. Anyhow, my wife and I landed at Louis Armstrong Airport. When we got out of the plane, it was a glorious day. Dry for New Orleans and about 75 degrees. Yet despite this, I was immediately assaulted with a feeling of oppression and started to experience intense nausea. Thinking it was just the cruddy airline food that they had served on the plane, we went to our hotel, a seedy hotel named the Lazy 8. Getting to the hotel, I immediately took some antacid and laid down on the bed. About an hour later, I was feeling somewhat better, and so we went to the Commander's Palace. It was a glorious meal. The turtle soup and foie gras were wonderful. I highly recommend it, if you are not sensitive to the spirit realm. Anyhow, after the meal I was sick. I mean, really sick. My wife, on the other hand, was fine. Since we had eaten the same food, we knew it was not the food that caused my illness. Yet, I was violently ill from both ends, if you are picking up what I am laying down. So because I was feeling so poor, we decided to turn in early. When we got back to the hotel, I use the term hotel generously, I ran straight to the bathroom, and then, exhausted, straight to bed. I slept soundly until 3:33 a.m. At that time, I woke up with a start to the most horrendous sulfur smell I've ever encountered in my life, and I have lived in Beaumont, Texas. It was so bad, it would gag a maggot. Now I assumed it was a backed up toilet. I mean, I had used and abused it extensively. You could be forgiven if you were to assume that with all my experience with the paranormal, that I would have been more perceptive. I mean, a horrendous sulfur smell? Check. Crap starting at 3:33 to mock the Trinity? Check. Nausea and sickness? Check. The oppressive feeling? Check. You would have thought I would have realized that I was under spiritual assault, but you would be wrong. As my wife says, I can be wonderfully obtuse and oblivious to things that are going on around me. Then, just as I was starting to get up to check the toilet, I was violently slammed down back onto the bed. Now, I'm a big man, 6'2", 220 pounds. It takes some doing to take me down. Yet, this force was so powerful, I could not help but being helplessly thrown down. At the same time, the smell got even stronger and stronger. Then, I felt hands on my chest, and a body crawl on top of me. Now, I was not laying there passively. The whole time I was squirming, pushing with all my might, trying to throw what felt like a body off of me, trying to get away. No can do. It is then, in that helpless situation, that I felt hands reaching down to my, well, use your imagination. It was then that I saw it. No, not a black horned creature, but a woman who was opalescent and wearing what I can only describe as a faded flower print shirt. It was then that I understood that this was paranormal, a demon of some kind. So I started praying out loud. I started praying the prayer of St. Patrick's breastplate. Look it up. It is a powerful prayer. Basically, you are binding yourself to the Holy Trinity, calling on God and the communion of saints to protect you. As I did this, she, and it took the form of a she, let out a scream and vanished. Now I was able to sit up and look around. Smell gone, the presence gone, oppression and nausea still there. Now, I would chalk all this up to a lucid dream and sleep paralysis, or even to illness, except for one salient fact. My wife saw the whole thing. She even described the demon's shirt, down to the pale flowers on it. My wife is a trained observer, one who has been trained to remain calm in extreme situations and take notice of everything. So you can take her eyewitness testimony as valid. During the whole event, like the good wife and cop that she is, she tried to intervene, but she had also been held down and had been unable to move or speak. Needless to say, we were both scared, and so we left that hotel quickly. As we were leaving, I was sick again, violently, so my wife drove fast. She was in law enforcement at the time, so she had the brass passport, so there was no fear of a speeding ticket. Anyhow, we drove until we got to the bridge that takes you to Mississippi. As soon as we got over the bridge, it all just stopped. Everything went away. No more nausea, no more oppressive feelings, everything gone. I felt fine, except for my shattered nerves. Needless to say, after the conference we took a flight out of Gulfport rather than New Orleans. So, what was it? I'm not positive. I think it was a demon called a succubus, but I'm not sure, other than knowing it was a demon. New Orleans is a dangerous place. Spiritual warfare is rampant there. People conjure up things that they cannot control. If you are clergy, if you are spiritually sensitive, stay away from New Orleans, no matter how good the food may be, no matter how much fun you might think you will have, because it is a dangerous place. I bid you peace. Pastor Vince. This must be the dumbest thing I've ever done in my life, so I hope you guys don't do it. I was passing by the old, renowned Holland House, which was said to be haunted by a demonic force, and was recalling all the ghost stories that I've heard about it there. I was returning home from a friend's place, and since it was around 5 o'clock, I decided to check the place out. The funny thing was that the gates were not locked. So I went in and through the front door without anything happening to me. I explored the whole place, which was quite big, till I decided to conclude that there was no such demonic force in that place. But then, I came across a door which I had not seen earlier on, as it was around the back, just when I was about to leave. So I checked my watch to see if Father Time permitted me to explore the place, as I had to be home by 7 for dinner, as I promised my mum. The watch said 6:40 p.m, so I continued my exploration after deciding to take a cab back later. Before entering the door, I realized that there were 3 numbers carved near its hinges. It said 666. I laughed. Must be satanic. And I entered the room. I saw this chair at the corner and decided to take a seat for a while, as all the walking had made me tired. I realized that I was in the kitchen that was kept quite neat for such an old house. It was getting dark, so I decided to leave. Just as I got up, I heard a growl. Thinking it was a stray dog, I turned with caution, slowly. And there was nothing there. It started to freak me out, and I briskly walked to the door I came in from. Although there was a back door, I did not want to take a chance that it might be locked and waste time. By this time, the sky was dark, and my watch said 7:20 p.m. Whoa, I thought I'm going to be fried by my mother. But a half-human howl made me look back into the kitchen. In the shadows, I saw a creature with a head like a dog, but it had horns for its ears and was standing on 2 feet. Then some unseen force slammed the 666 door shut. This time I dashed to the back door and prayed that it was not locked. Lucky me, the door swung open easily, and I dashed out to hail a cab. But on the way out, I saw a skeleton of a dog with its skull 2 to 3 feet away from its body and a weird-looking footprint in the mud out of the back door. The cab driver asked why I looked so pale, and I told him everything. He said I was stupid and should not have tried, as he himself knew of a lot of people who have had their share of experiences. I returned home for free and told my mother why I was late to escape her wrath. Although she didn't believe me, she let me off. Till now, I still cover my head with a blanket when I hear the howl of a dog. Although a lot of people may have experienced ghost encounters, rarely do you have such a close proximity with someone who is demonically possessed. My brother, someone whom I thought could never be the one I fear, had gone through a series of demonic possessions recently. It's quite lucky that it doesn't happen anymore. It all began with weird behavior, shutting himself out in the room, coming home late, and being quite antisocial. All of a sudden, my family was thrown into a disarray of the most unexpected incidents that we thought we could never have experienced, considering how pious my parents are. It happened during May and June. He first started passing out suddenly in school. The school thought it was just a health problem. Then, it grew a little bit worse, with my brother suddenly staring blankly and not seeming to hear what others were trying to tell him. Finally, he started passing out and then waking up to be something else, mumbling and muttering in a totally different language. He would thrash around wildly, and the school, being so dumb and not professional, called the ambulance, who of course weren't in the right capacity to do anything about it. It kept happening all the time in school, him passing out and going hysterical. His eyes would be open and bloodshot, and he had tried to strangle his teacher as well as his friends, He could shove away many people holding him. He was unusually strong, and he would speak in a foreign language, half like some Buddhist chanting, and half something animal-like, hissing and growling. We brought him home many times, but rarely did it happen there. He could not remember what happened, except that before he blacked out, he said he could hear a distant laughing and drums beating, which came nearer and nearer, and finally he would feel giddy and pass out. During that period when it all went berserk and worse, my brother would continuously, day after day, pass out. My mother would sleep in his bedroom, and she once told me that she woke up one night because she couldn't sleep well, and she saw this dark figure standing by his bedside. She called out. She thought it was him, but it disappeared the moment she saw it. One morning my school started late, and so did my sisters. We were alone as my mother had gone to buy some groceries. I bathed and kept having this bad feeling that he would start suddenly. When I came out of the bathroom, the phone rang. Just when I was about to pick it up, I heard some deep growling in his bedroom, and I froze immediately. I tiptoed to his bedroom and saw him thrashing around in his bed wildly. We tried reading some holy verses, and it seemed to get worse. It was the last straw. We called up a friend of my mother's for help. We spent a lot of money and time then. It was quite a waste, and it never seemed to help. It grew worse. He would be flung against the wall, and would grow hysterical when he went for religious classes, especially when he heard the call for prayer. Even when his friends all sat on him, he threw them off and started punching at everyone. The incidents happened regularly and repeatedly. We were so afraid that it would continue for a long time. He would suddenly shut himself in the room and scream and throw tantrums. The door to his room would close suddenly, and he would keep saying that he saw 3 women, all ugly and fiery, laughing at him. These 3 women had long hair and vampire-like teeth, and were all naked, as so described by him. He even dreamt of them. It would also happen in the hospital whenever the school sent him there. During the evening around 7+, he would suddenly become another person, and would talk in a low growl and describe the 3 women. It seemed like he was possessed by a lot of things. He would hiss and tell his story with his deep breathing. We called an ustaz, and he managed to make things go away, even though he was still acting strange, and it was now that it didn't seem to happen anymore. He was said to be possessed by some animal and Buddhist ghost. The animal was some alien-looking thingy with vampire-like teeth, and we knew how it looked because he drew it. He was into witchcraft. He got interested after watching Buffy and the Craft and Charmed, and used the internet to look for incantations and spells, practicing it and calling out for them. He thought it was harmless, but now he knows it was wrong. We found many verses and spells among his school notes and papers. We threw them all away the moment we found them. Reincarnation of death or something like that. This story took place in a small town in rural Vietnam. It was told to me by my uncle. People in that town lived in houses very close to one another. There were houses built close together, with a mere 5-foot wooden fence separating their backyards. The backyards doubled as their kitchens. Back then they didn't have that great of a refrigerator to keep their meat from getting spoiled. So the only way for them to keep their meat was to put salt in the meat and store it in the kitchen in the backyard. They didn't have any special container to put it in, but just inside a shelf on the table. Everything was well and peaceful in that small town, until something strange happened to a family. On the night when it all started, the housewife of that family routinely stored their extra meat in the backyard. The next morning, as she was making breakfast, she found a piece of meat missing. Furious, she went around asking everyone in the family where or what did they do with the meat. Nobody knew what happened to that piece of meat, and they didn't give it much thought either. The housewife too, although a bit upset, just went to the market and got more meat. That night, she did the same thing again with the extra meat, but this time she kept it in a different shelf to make sure no one would take it away. The next morning, she went to the backyard and checked, but again, found the meat missing. By this time, she was very upset. She complained to her husband that their meat was stolen 2 nights in a row. They decided they should investigate further to solve the problem. The husband suggested that they stay up that very night and keep an eye on the backyard. They were determined to catch the culprit that very night. That night, the couple sat by the window overlooking the backyard. They turned off the lights after their children had gone to bed to make sure no one could see them from outside. It was a hot, full moon night, with only the sound of crickets and owls howling. Everyone in the small town was already in bed by midnight, except, of course, the couple who was getting more and more anxious. It was slightly after 1 a.m. when the couple saw the shadow of a person jumping over their fence into their backyard. Under the bright moonlight, they could work out it was a woman, though they couldn't see exactly who she was. Then, the woman walked closer and towards the piece of meat sitting in the shelf, just a few feet away from them. Once she gets her hands on the meat, we will rush out and catch her red-handed, the wife whispered to her husband. As the woman reached out for the meat, the couple slowly moved towards the door. However, they were stunned by what they saw next. The woman was holding onto the meat and eating it raw. Under the bright moonlight also, they saw who the woman was. She was actually the old lady from next door. What gave them the creeps was the way she looked. The old lady looked as if she had been possessed. She was taking big bites and tearing the meat apart with her sharp teeth and fangs. After finishing up the meat, she just ran and jumped over the fence like a strong youth. The next morning, the couple went over to the neighbor's house to consult with them over what had happened. Of course, the neighbor was shocked to hear what had happened and refused to believe that it was the grandmother of the family who did it. The neighbor told them that it was impossible because the old lady had been very ill for the last couple of days. The couple thought they have been mistaken, but didn't give much thought to the old lady. That night, the husband and wife went out of town for some dealings. They left their 1-year-old baby at home with a babysitter. By midnight, the babysitter had put the baby to sleep and was sitting in the living room waiting for the couple to come back. The couple, however, did not come back until almost 1 o'clock. Just as they stepped foot into the house, they heard a loud scream from the baby's room, followed by an agonizing cry. The 3 of them rushed to the baby to see what had happened. As soon as they got into the room and turned on the lights, the parents' darkest fear came true. The old lady from next door was on her meat hunt again. However, there was no meat in the backyard that night, so she had come into the baby's room and was gnawing on the baby's arm instead. The old woman was clearly possessed by a demon. Her pale face and fangs showed it all. She had no sense of what or whom she was eating. The wife gave out a loud scream and the husband rushed towards the old lady to push her away. The old woman fell off the bed and jumped out through the window. The husband grabbed his son and dragged his wife and babysitter out of the house. They yelled for help from the neighbors, and soon a few people had come out. The husband explained what had happened while a doctor attended to the baby. The neighbors were equally shocked, but they were determined to get the demon. They rushed to the old lady's house, but found no one at home. So they broke into the house, running from room to room, looking for the old lady, but she was nowhere to be found. They all ran back out to see if she had got out of the house. One of the neighbors spotted someone on top of the roof and started to call out for the others. The neighbors surrounded the house and tried to get her down by throwing rocks at her. However, the harder they tried, the louder she would laugh at them. So they decided the only way to get her down and to get rid of her at the same time was to burn down the house. They moved whatever valuables out of the house and started burning the house from the inside. Stubbornly, the demon was still on top of the roof. Everyone was standing around the house, watching it burn down with the old lady on top. As the house was burning into an inferno, the demon was still up there, taunting at them and running around on the roof. Soon she was trapped in the fire. As the house collapsed, the old lady fell down with the house. They all heard a blood-curdling scream that sounded so evil. And then there was silence, and that was the end of it. The next day they searched the burnt-down house but couldn't find any ashes. All they found was a very small skull. Nobody knew what happened to that old lady or her family. Rumors had it that they had moved out of town and the old lady had died before that night. What the people saw that night was the demon that had taken over the body of the old lady. This story may have sounded like a story in the movies, but it really did happen in a small town in Vietnam long ago. Sometimes in life, there are a lot of unexpected things. Seeing ghosts or listening to a ghost story is one, but there are more out there than just ghosts. You see, in my opinion, it is not ghosts that hurt you, but demons. The following are true accounts of demonic possessions and exorcisms. None of them are made up or an exaggeration in any way whatsoever. Before I go on with my story, I would like to make some issues very clear so as to help in understanding these accounts better. As Christians, we believe very strongly that we have power and authority over demons and evil spirits. It is not because we are so great or we have methods to do so, but simply the fact that Jesus died and he rose again. He has defeated the source of all evil. Before he was taken up into heaven, Jesus gave that power and authority to his people, those who believe him as Lord and Master. The Bible talks about it in great detail. I am a first-hand witness to that fact through my many victorious encounters with demons and evil spirits. The following stories are from the Philippines, where I spent about 6 months. Here we go. I've seen many demon possessions through the years. People who at one moment are so normal as anyone you see in the streets, and the next, they are a total different person. In a flash, they become so aggressive and violent that sometimes it would take a dozen just to hold them down. It would be amazing to see sweet little angels who turn into foul-mouthed demons. I can tell you that all the bad words that you know are nothing compared to what these lash out when the demon within them shows itself. There are others who make noises like animals. I know of one who meowed like a cat and barked like a dog. I have seen some that act like monkeys. There was this case of a group of Christians who went to do deliverance in an HDB house. Deliverance is the word Christians use for an exorcism. I shall thus use that too. When they got there, the demons inside the person knew they were coming to kick them out and became very violent and started shouting and screaming at the top of their voice. As the Christians started to cast out the demon, it leaps over the people and jumped out of the living room window. Everyone there got the shock of his or her lives. You see, they were on the 9th floor of the building. Everyone thought that the person must have died, but they were in for another shock. When they looked down from the window, they saw the person standing and laughing at them from the ground floor. Well, to cut the long story short, they managed to catch the person and cast out the stuntman wannabe demon out of the person. There are even those demons that hiss and move like a snake on the ground. The reason why these demons do that is because they want to sidetrack everyone. They cause the people to be taken by all these antics and not focus on the real thing. They also do these things to instill fear in the midst of the people who see all this. Fear is the main weapon that demons use to keep people in bondage. One afternoon, one of the church friends came to look for me. He told me that a man came and sought help from him. He told him that he was tormented by evil spirits in his home. So this brother and I went over to his house later in the afternoon. His house was in the corner of the road junction and stood beside a huge tree. I later learned that the tree itself had many, many stories of its own. When we got into the house, it felt rather dark and dank. There was an unpleasant feel to it all. The man sounded very troubled and nervous throughout. Then, all of a sudden, he began to break out in cold sweat and just stared towards the kitchen. Then he told us that the evil spirit was looking at us from the kitchen. We told him to calm down and decided to go take a look, and also to reassure him that there was nothing to fear. So, I walked to the kitchen. As I mentioned, the whole house felt funny, but I didn't find anything more unusual than that. He then told me that as I made my way to the kitchen, the evil spirit left. My friend and I decided to return later in the afternoon as we had a meeting to attend to, and also to get a few others, as we wanted to remove some occult things that were in this house. The occult is an open door for demons to enter and torment someone. I have seen so many in such a state. As we returned in the evening, the man was totally different from the one we met in the afternoon. He was no longer the hapless and needy man who wanted a way of his troubles, but was rather defensive and reluctant. After much time trying to talk to him, he refused to allow us to remove the objects from his house. In any deliverance, we can't focus a person to be free. We can cast out a demon, but if the person does not want to let go, the demons will not leave. So that night, we had to leave him, though we would have loved to see him freed from his torment. Another afternoon, I was resting and was about to take a bath. One of the church members came with her daughter. She requested prayer for her daughter, as her stomach had bloated twice the size in less than a day. She told me that there was another woman after her son-in-law, and she put a curse on her daughter to get her out of the way. Folks, I saw her stomach for myself, and I am sure she was not with a baby. I did not do any mumbo-jumbo stuff. As a Christian, we don't need all that. I just prayed the simplest prayer that I think I've ever prayed. There was no hype, no nothing. And after a minute or so, they both left. The next day I met the mother in church, and the first thing I wanted to know was how her daughter was doing. She told me that after they left the place where I was at, within an hour, her daughter's stomach was healed and returned to normal size. She was so thankful to God for breaking the curse that was placed on her daughter. Exorcism or deliverance does not just apply to possessions, but some sickness and diseases are caused by evil spirits. In this case, it was a result of a curse. By far, the greatest victory in exorcism I've ever had up to this point was the one involving what I would call the terror of Caputuan. Caputuan is a town in western Philippines. There was this boy who terrorized the whole town. He was possessed by a demon. I mean, really possessed. He would sometimes go to the town market, and the demons would manifest themselves there. Note the plural, as there were more than one demon inside of him. He would transform himself like a monster, and his nails and teeth would grow in length and size. and he would seize meat from the meat stores and eat it raw. The whole town knew about him and feared him. The worst thing of all was that he was crippled. He has to move around with crutches, but when the demons take over, he just moves around as freely as anyone else does, and even faster than anyone. One day, one of the local pastors told me that we need to go and do something about this and help this boy of 15 years of age. A week later, we, together with another pastor, headed to his house in a farm some distance away from the town. The three of us hopped onto one motorbike, and we were off. Yes, folks, 3 of us on one motorbike. I'll just leave it to your imagination to how that looked like. After avoiding a few potholes and falling off the bike, which we nearly did, we finally reached the house. It was set in a hill and looked beautiful and green all around. One of the pastors asked me if I needed him to translate when I speak to the demons. I told him that there is no need for that. He will understand me. We heard from the boy's father that he was around moments ago, but suddenly he went off to hide himself. The demons knew that we were coming. The first thing we did was to remove all sharp objects and copper from the area, as people who are possessed can become very violent, and we did not want to be caught off guard. Then, we went around the whole house looking for him, and finally we found him inside a back portion of the house. He was very skinny, and as I mentioned, crippled. How could he be the terror of the town, I thought, and I felt compassion for him and anger for the demons that tormented him. Finally, we got him to come out. We managed to get him seated and started the deliverance. The moment I spoke to the demons, the boy began to shut his ears very tight. The demons sure did understand me all right. We demanded the demons leave the boy at once. We had told the demons that we were not interested in their manifestations, but their immediate departure. The demons were speaking through the boy and were giving excuses like they can't come out, as it was day. I shot back at them and said that was a lie and demanded they leave now. It did not take long before the demons were cast out. That's when we learned that the boy was possessed when he was on his way back from school one day, and he met 3 kids. They wanted to be his friends, and he did not know that the kids were actually demons in disguise. They've been controlling him ever since. The deliverance was complete without much hassle. The next day we got him to stay over so that the church could look after him. The aftercare is the most important in these kind of cases. Things were going on well until one night. The demons manifested themselves again. I was not there at that time. The pastor told me that his face turned like a goat with claws and fangs. The pastors tried to control him with the help of 2 other brothers. Sensing the fear in these 2 young chaps, the demons threatened to enter them. Not wanting to take chances, the pastor told the 2 to leave. They spent the whole night battling with the demons until finally they broke through. When the boy came to himself, he confessed that after the first time that he was freed, he did not tell us something. The demons had given him a talisman as a pact between them, and every full moon, he will have to dance with them. He did not throw away that talisman, but kept it. Finally that night, he surrendered it, and it was burnt. He was set free, and until today, he is totally free. The Bible says that he who the Son, Jesus, sets free will be free indeed. And that is very true with this boy. This boy is a witness of Jesus' victory throughout the whole town. From when I was 3 to 10 years old, my family lived in a tiny second-floor walk-up apartment in a large city. Our apartment was long and narrow, and my family had to walk through my bedroom to get to the bathroom. So it was a cramped lifestyle, to say the least. Around when I turned 8, my parents decided to offer me a bit of privacy, asking me if I wanted to move into a separate bedroom that had its own entrance and exit from the entry stairwell. It was extremely small, basically a closet, but I was eager to move in there because it was private and at least away from my parents and baby brothers. From the very first night they moved my bed into this room, I saw a very dark, shadowy presence fading in and out of the wall. It had no eyes, but razor teeth. Its mouth opened to silently scream. I thought I was going crazy. I never told another soul about it. I saw it nearly every night for 2 years. It was tall and thin and a living shadow. That's all I can do to describe it. The walls were plastered with children's animal-themed wallpaper from the previous owners. If I recall, it had strange little toy animals, repeated over and over. Because of the bizarre events happening in that room, this innocent decor seemed ominous. My mother would occasionally come into my room to check on me, and I would be soaked through my pajamas in my own sweat from hiding under the cheap blankets. I was petrified of that room. I was living in hell, but I had no options, because my baby brothers now slept in my old room. I became sleep-deprived and unhealthy. I think my teachers might have commented on my deteriorating mental state to my parents. Over that time, I became obsessed with the occult and paranormal. Now that I'm over 50 years old, I feel like that same shadowy entity is still inside me and has been with me my entire life. Could I be possessed by it?
My entire life, I was followed around multiple states from my childhood to adulthood. I'm not sure who or what it was, but it always found me. It seemed to be trying hard to make me extremely uncomfortable. I was a Christian as a kid, and whenever I used religious calls, prayers and phrases, it would go away for a while. I spent most of my life pretending not to notice anything. Things moving, a weight on my bed next to me, strange sounds when it was quiet. I eventually lost my belief in Judeo-Christianism and was given advice by a pagan friend on how to get rid of it. Most of the advice was a huge lifestyle and personality change. Stay positive, know your power over them, and eliminate unnecessary worry and fear. It worked. It took practice, but it worked completely. She explained to me that religion is usually used in these situations because it is total belief. Belief strengthens intent. But if you have strong intent without belief, it is exactly the same. Either way, my problem was solved for a while. I ended up getting married and having kids. That made things start happening again, in whichever home we lived. I noticed that it was much more difficult to fight negative with positive when there are 5 other people in your home to add to the negative. I can't make them change the way I had to as a young adult. Since then, I've seen signs of activity and immediately turned up my protection a notch. The activity goes away but comes back if I left my guard down. It's been back and forth, and I've always handled it pretty well. But about a week ago I had my first nightmare in years. My youngest daughter and wife also had nightmares that night. I immediately noticed the signs and took my usual steps to make it go away again. It hasn't been working, and the next night I was in the kitchen late at night and my dog started growling, baring teeth, and had his hair standing on end. He's literally never done this. I've had him for 7 months and never heard him growl unless he's playing with a toy with our other dog. The same night when I was putting my daughter to sleep, she looked over to the window, glared and then grabbed onto me and squeezed. She kept trying to sneak peeks back over there. The blinds were drawn and the windows were closed. This was the third time that day that I saw her staring at nothing, confused and scared. She's been falling over a lot more lately, sometimes bruising herself. Last night, I told my wife about these signs and asked her to try and stay positive. Stop stressing so much, the basics. This is not the first time we've had these conversations, and she agreed and understood. We went to sleep and I slept horribly. My wife told me about half hour ago that at 2 a.m.-ish, my daughter was sleeping on our bed at the foot, which she doesn't usually do because she loves to snuggle, and she started screaming horribly. She wasn't moving any part of her body, like it was being held still for her. Her eyes were wide open and she was just screaming bloody murder. I'm at work, but my first instinct is to haul ass home and confront it like I have done in the past. But I'm not in the right state to do so, and I'm just too angry, and that'll only feed it. My real problem is, I think I've passed a piece of it to my daughter, like a GD virus. The techniques I've been using for 7 years aren't working anymore, and I don't know what to do. I have 2 teenagers and a very stressed out wife. The negativity in my house is off the charts, and if anyone has any advice, I'd certainly appreciate it.
This was a few years ago. I purchased my childhood home with my husband. The first couple of years we had a toxic roommate who would put us against each other. Over time he ended up staying in his room all the time, falling into a depression. He found a boyfriend and moved out. I wasted no time turning the spare room into a guest quarters. I started having horrible insomnia, so to allow my husband to sleep undisturbed, I moved to the guest room. This is where things got dark. I finally found a healthy sleeping pattern that was working for me and getting real sleep. That's when the nightmares started. A clown was in the closet, but not any clown. A demonic, evil, twisted clown. Side note, I am not afraid of clowns in the slightest. He kept telling me that I was to be his bride, and that I needed to kill everyone I loved in order to bring him fully into this world. And in my nightmares, I would plan with him and agree. I would wake up, and the closet door, which had been closed and latched with an old school hook and eye latch, would be wide open, and everything in it disheveled. I feared the ex-roommate's depression had opened a doorway for darkness to enter, as he was in a vulnerable state when he occupied the room. After weeks and weeks of these nightmares every night, I decided to cleanse the house. I opened the front door and burned sage. My husband and I both have indigenous ancestry, so the burning of sage is a cleanse our ancestors held sacred. I started in the attic, making certain the smoke touched even the darkest corners, and cleansed room by room. When I began in the spare room, the light bulb exploded. The doorknobs rattled. I did not stop. I pushed until I felt the energy leave the house. My husband, who was outside with our dog, knew when it was over. I never said a word because he saw the darkness shoot out the front door. We've had no issues since. The nightmares stopped immediately. The closet door remained closed and latched. But I will never forget the hopelessness and darkness I felt in those dreams. I will never know why it showed itself to me as a clown.
I live with my dad, sister and cousin. My cousin is male and 16 years old, and for some reason decided to summon some demons for wealth, good mental health and one thing or another. This was about 1.5 years ago, and I was completely unaware of this until he started talking about some weird dreams he'd been having. He then described all the exact details of the dream, beside being in different locations of the house that I had a few nights before, and that's when I got really worried. Here's the dream. So I start in the dream in my room, which is at the top level of my 3-story house. And I have an impending doom feeling, so I look down to my stairs and there it is. A dark shadow standing halfway down them, so I run at it, trying to run past it to get downstairs. And for some reason I stop right in front of it, feeling the worst burning inside, an impending doom feeling I've ever experienced. And it just morphs into a dark shadow cat. Then I kind of snap out of it and start running to the basement of the house, all while it's following me. I get to my dad's room and start beating on the door and screaming, trying to get him to open it. And everything just slowly starts to lose sound as the cat comes closer, and I'm screaming but no sound comes out. Then I woke myself up from a whimpering type scream, and my cousin said he had the exact same dream, but it started at his room, which is the basement as well. The shadow person morphs. He beats on my dad's door and the cat rubs against his leg and he wakes up. If that wasn't strange enough on its own, he has started to hear voices calling his name, getting closer and louder each time, telling him to wake up, even when he's at school and away from home. And today he went to walk to the buses and there was a humanish shadow figure standing near a barn, accompanied by the sound of thumping that got louder and louder. He said he tries to call out to it, but it wouldn't respond, and it set off the motion detector lights at the barn, and it just still remained a dark, shadowy figure. The thumping continued to get louder, until it just stopped, and the figure just disappeared. That has been pretty much how it's been for a while. I have other odd experiences as well, but my question is, does anyone know what it is? And if there's any way that I can protect myself from it, or make it go away.
On November 25th, at 4 a.m., I woke up in a panic. I have been having sleep paralysis this whole month. It happens every November, and whenever I am stressed. This time was different though. I woke up and was able to pull out of my sleep paralysis fairly quickly. But I felt this intense feeling of something staring at me with deep hatred. I sat up fast and looked around my room, something I never do. Usually, after having a sleep paralysis episode, I dig deeper into my covers because it's frightening. But this time, I felt scared and in danger. At the doorway of my room was this 8 to 10 foot tall thing. It had a goat head, I don't remember seeing horns on it, and a gorilla body. I grabbed my phone and turned the flashlight on and shined it. I didn't feel brave enough to shine it at its face, but illuminated it enough to see its body and a bit of its face. I saw enough and screamed, a long scream. To be honest, I purposely screamed for a long time so my dad would come and save me, embarrassingly enough. Luckily, my parents live with me and my dad did end up barging into my room. He stayed at the doorway for a second, scanning my room, then ran in. When he ran in, he ran through the demon-looking thing. It grimaced when my dad walked through it, and it dispersed. My dad ended up hugging me for a little bit, before we had a sleepover in the living room with the cats. I know I'm too damn old to have my dad hugging me to sleep. 30, female. But that thing looked frightening. My dad is nearing 60 and very into Catholicism, almost to an extreme, as he grew up seeing what his grandmother had to go through as a curandera, a village healer. He says he sees a lot of ghosts and demons. He always has his prayer music on. He wasn't always like this. He always said he could see the supernatural, but he wasn't religious before. He got into a really stressful situation a few years ago, and all of this magnified to where he is now. And to be honest, I thought this was religious psychosis. I'm not religious at all, as the Catholic Church traumatized me growing up. And honestly, I was really hoping all these ghosts, shadows, demons I was seeing was just an overactive REM cycle, or my mind filling in the blanks. But this goat-head gorilla body thing looked so real and freaked me out when the flashlight didn't make it go away. Any thoughts on this? Edit. A year ago when I first got my house, I fell asleep on the floor of my room because I didn't have any furniture yet. I fell asleep to some frequency sounds, and during the night, it must have skipped over to another video. The video was a picture of a priest praying with a Bible at a group of people, maybe demons. It was a reddish picture from what I can remember. The sound was a priest chanting an exorcist prayer in Latin. This didn't wake me up. What did wake me up was something that tapped my foot twice. I woke up and heard that chanting, and it spooked me, and I turned it off. I was hoping that tapping was just a nervous tick, like my foot twitching or something. But now, I'm wondering about that experience too.
Back in 2015, I had this experience that made me realize the world is a stranger place than I thought it was. It was around 8 p.m. and I was coming back home from the movies. I dashed my foot against a stone and my body started to run against my will. A supernatural force had hijacked my legs that made me sprint extraordinarily. I finally managed to halt and walk normally after being played with for about 2 kilometers, which is a long way. As I tried to gather some sense of what happened, I saw something unusual in front of me. Near the signpost of an SDA church that I was a member of, there was a glowing shadow, a diabolical silhouette that just appeared, and what made it creepy was that its half was waist downwards, and it had no upper body. I was struck with fright. I knew my mind could not just make up such things, it was real. I started chanting Jesus' name several times, and I approached a stranger by the shops and rhapsodized to him what I'd seen and requested him to accompany me to our gate. I didn't even see his face because it was so dark. He was not even shocked by my narration. I did not disclose anything to my parents as we had supper, but Dad noticed my unusual stillness. We prayed and departed to sleep, and that is where my nightmares began. I could not catch a wink of sleep. I tried to kill time by reciting an SDA fundamental belief about Jesus and Christians having power over the forces of darkness. This really calmed me down. Then late into the night I felt an ominous presence. The dog outside started barking and flapping its ears, and whenever that happened I got physically attacked by a force so strong that it was pressing down on me, as if it wanted to gain entry into my body. I later thought it was the upper part of the demon that also wanted to inhabit me. I sweated, cried, and prayed under my blankets as I longed for sunrise. It was the longest night ever. The next day I realized that my legs were unusually stiff, and that they could literally just walk up a hill or hop to a spot without me putting effort in. I had been possessed by a half-genie. My cousin had also commented on my unusual speed when I ran. We were together watering cattle at a river when I decided to exorcise the pesky demon. I immersed myself in the water and read out a scripture from my pocket testament. When I reached home, I washed my hands, which were also possessed, wrist downwards, and I knew this because I had to hold a pen, and the handwriting was terrible. Whenever I tried to write Holy Spirit, it's almost as if my hand would deny me. I also wetted my lower half, poured the contaminated water and got ready for the genie to be expelled. Not sure if I was stimulating a voice of an angel in my head or if it was real, but I started the process and began convulsing. My thigh muscles contracted severely, so did my hands, and something told me to count to 700, and my frozen hands could be set free. I don't know what could have happened if anybody had busted in during this weird stuff, but when I finished, that was that. I was very glad to be relieved of whatever the hell that was.
I think it started with the nightmares. I've had a history in the past with ghosts and ghouls. A ghost attached itself to my brother when we were younger and would angrily throw things. We named her Cadence. My sister said Cadence would play hide and seek with her, showing up in the corner of her eye, only to duck out of view and my sister would turn to look at her. When I moved out at 16, Cadence did not follow me. This is something different, more negative. It started earlier this week, like I said, with the nightmares. The first one was about Kisaragi Station. If you don't know what that is, look it up. I encountered many people at the station, and when I got on, I arrived at a giant field with a dog. I don't remember after that. I also don't remember the second nightmare. The third, however, was yesterday night. In it, I was being chased through a small portal under some stairs. Writing this now, I'm realizing my last apartment had a staircase with a giant hole under it. My cat ran under there once, and I felt nearly feral with primal fear that gripped me when I got close to the hole. The person chasing me was a cannibal. I don't know how I knew. I just knew. We eventually came to a standoff. I was so close to her, but just out of her sight. She was looking away, but all she had to do was turn. And that's what she did. She turned slowly, eyes wide as she stared at me. I stared back in complete terror. She saw me and reached out to me, gripping my hand harshly. I woke up slowly, filled with chest-crunching terror. I could still feel the woman's grip on my hand as I woke up, nearly crushing my fingers. For context, I sleep curled up every night, sometimes on my back, but never with my hand anywhere near the edge of my full-sized bed. I woke up with my hand dangling off the side of my bed, reaching out. I felt eyes on me from the closet and stared. With complete certainty, the only thought I had was demon. Spooked to hell, I stayed awake and considered asking my Catholic roommate to bless my room, or at least the apartment. Silly, right? But my roommate had done it before, and it was all fine. Until my cat broke their Mary statue. After the statue broke, the smells started, like something rotted in our apartment. My roommate's senior cat started getting nervous too. She used to never meow. She meows constantly now, and one time we even heard her on the other side of the apartment building while we were checking the mail. We just heard her screaming. Confused, we rushed back to our apartment on the other floor and opened our apartment door to find the cat staring at the door and practically howling. This morning, we found a huge blood stain on my roommate's pillow. Frowning, I checked her cat over because we thought maybe the cat had bled on it. She was spotless. My roommate shrugged it off and washed the blood stain off. Is this a demon? Can anyone give me some guidance on how to handle this? Update 1. Here I'll answer some of the more common questions. I am not Catholic or Japanese. I'm actually native, and for the past 4 years I've been working hard on my journey of converting to Judaism. It seemed so strange to me that a possible entity as my roommate and I have taken to calling it in private, would target me, native and, as of right now, not aligned to a religion, especially not Catholicism, as opposed to my religious roommate. My roommate joked that maybe it was because this entity could smell the holiness on them, as opposed to me. I joked that that would make them all the more tempting, wouldn't it? I talked with some of my friends and looked over all of your advice, pondering what to do. In the end, with the help of my roommate, we covered all the mirrors in the house, specifically the one positioned directly across from my bed, left there by the previous tenants and glued to the wall. And my roommate created a splint for their Mary statue and covered her in holy water. They then holy watered the apartment. My roommate's godfather is a pastor, or priest, I'm not sure which is where they got the holy water. Strangely enough, the entity did not feel angry. My room, more specifically, my closet, felt as if it were pouting more than anything. The entity isn't mad about what my roommate and I have done. It seems more annoyed and petulant. My friend suggested that maybe I leave some snacks out for it, to say that I meant no harm. I told him that interacting with it was the last thing I really wanted to do. Sleeping last night was strange, even if I didn't have a nightmare. Well, even if I didn't have a nightmare. My roommate, on the other hand, was not so lucky, and playfully complained to me that I had handed them the nightmare stick. I tried to sleep before my roommate, just for my own peace of mind. Unfortunately, I just couldn't. I curled up facing away from my closet, and even though a heat wave had just hit that day, I refused to come out of my blanket cocoon. Even as I started overheating severely, I just tried to sleep. But I could feel its eyes on me, just staring, annoyed, like I was being ridiculous. As I settled down, I kept getting flashes in my mind of grinning teeth and staring eyes. Although, even I can admit that I know that the brain does weird things when the body is falling asleep, especially as hopped up on fear as I was. I didn't manage to sleep then, unfortunately. I knew if I tried again, I wouldn't be able to get to sleep before 3 a.m., and I did not want to be trying to sleep at 3 a.m. Call me superstitious. So I hatched a plan. I would simply stay up past 3 a.m. and go to sleep at 4 a.m. so that this entity wouldn't inflict me with nightmares. And, well, it worked. It hit 4 a.m. on the dot, and I shut my laptop down and took my headphones off. It was so silly. I couldn't help laugh quietly to myself. I turned over and went to sleep and dreamed about the heatwave. More recent update. Hi, it has been quite a few months since I moved out. It was a carbon monoxide leak. I had been stewing in carbon monoxide for months. Everybody, please check your carbon monoxide alarms. I'm all good now. Thank you all so much for the support. Just a note from Papa. Even though the author of this one did tell me it was a carbon monoxide leak, I thought it was a good story and a good warning to everyone to check for things like carbon monoxide leaks before jumping to conclusions.